The purpose of this screencast is to read aloud facts about World War II, and it is a chapter summary, so it sums up the entire war in a couple paragraphs. So, chapter summary. Looking at this, we can see people celebrating after the end of World War II, and it appears as though they are. This must be in America somewhere, but it doesn't indicate where. I'm guessing New York City. All right, so chapter summary, World War II. In this chapter, you read about World War II and how it affected people in the United States. You used an illustration to understand the experience of different American groups during World War II. World War II began in Europe and grew until it engulfed the globe. All Americans were touched in some way by the war. So, important question answered here. It tells you where it happened. It started in Europe and then spread throughout the globe, mainly to Asia. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor brought the United States decisively into the war. The conflict centered on two areas, Europe and the Pacific. In Europe, the Allies attacked Germany from three directions before finally winning victory on VE Day. Only after defeating Germany did the Allies discover the extent of the Holocaust, Germany's systemic murder of millions of Jews and other peoples. In the Pacific, Allied forces battled the Japanese on many small islands before dropping the atomic bombs that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki and forced Japan to surrender, ending the war. So this is a pretty important paragraph because it tells you where things took place. It also tells you some hows and whys. So it tells you that America was brought into the war because of Pearl Harbor. It says that the war was then fought in two theaters. It was fought in Europe, and that includes Germany and England and France. It was also fought in the Pacific, which are the islands around Japan. And then it says in Europe, the Holocaust was happening, and this is where the Nazis or the Germans were systemically killing millions of Jews in concentration camps. Fighting the war required a unified effort. Millions of Americans served in the armed forces. The government created new agencies to manage production and to control the flow of war information. American consumers contributed to the war effort by coping creatively with rationing and food shortages. Women replaced men in vital occupations and served in non-combat roles in the armed forces. So this paragraph tells you that the war helped America innovate, so it allowed people to kind of work and use different methods to save and to file information and to use Morse code and things like that. It also helped on the home front. People would use less food and make less purchases, and women replaced men in the workplace. So at home, people had to change their habits in order to support the war. For Japanese Americans on the West Coast, the war was a painful time of unjust confinement in internment camps. African Americans and Mexican Americans also coped with prejudice even as they contributed to the war effort. Jewish Americans witnessed how anti-Semitism and a fear of refugees kept the United States from responding sooner to the plight of European Jews. Although fighting the war helped to unify the nation, the experiences of these groups reveal some of the divisions that still exist in American society. So as we can see, when Mexican and African Americans returned from war, they were still treated as second-class citizens or people that weren't as important as whites. Also, Japanese Americans were put into internment camps where they were kept there until the war was over because, simply put, the Japanese weren't trusted by the U.S. government. And also, lots of Jews began to travel throughout North America, including the United States, to get out of Europe and the dangers that were there. And when they arrived in America, they still faced prejudice, which is called anti-Semitism. So even though the war unified everybody, as you can see in this picture, everybody's unified, there were still groups that were left out. All right, this reading came from History Alive textbook, and it's by the author Diane Hart. This ends the reading.